Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has the unique privilege of being the third film in this series to wrap up the entire franchise. After Disney paid over $4 billion for Lucasfilm, there was no way they were going to let the Indiana Jones IP go without squeezing out one last movie. But after what is universally considered a pretty lackluster fourth movie, could Dial of Destiny return the franchise to its former glory? Now, generally, movie sequels suck, and that's because they're tricky to get right. Majority of films have a happy ending where the character accomplishes their goal. Indy defeats the Nazis, Andy Dufresne escapes prison, Tom Hanks saves Private Ryan, which is great. The hard part is most movies aren't designed with a sequel in mind, let alone four. So in the next one, even after the character has gotten what they needed, a sequel needs to be able to put the character back to square one again, with a new goal and new obstacles. That can be a tough thing to do. How do you find another reason for Ripley to face down Xenomorphs, or have another Terminator sent back? Great sequels like Aliens or T2 find a fun twist to go back for a second time, but as these franchises go on, there's a less and less compelling reason to bring these characters back to do the same thing. But the Indiana Jones sequels work partly because the whole idea of another adventure is baked into the entire concept. After Indy finishes one adventure, you can easily imagine him going off on another one. And even though The Last Crusade has the perfect ending with them riding off into the sunset, it never closed the door on the idea that the character could have other adventures. When he rocks back up again in Crystal Skull, it does just feel like he's where he'd always be, getting into trouble. And that's because Indiana Jones as a character never has a massive arc across the movies. He has them, he changes from skeptic to believer in Raiders, he reconnects with his father and learns to let go of the treasure in Last Crusade, but these aren't huge shifts in his character and not something the sequels ever have to pick up on or deal with. He has people who are on his adventures for that movie, but it then resets and he can have a completely new adventure in the next one without any baggage. That is until Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, there's a lot of issues with that movie, but I'm going to ignore the Tarzan swing and nuclear resistant fridge here. The really interesting part of Crystal Skull, and the part I quite like, is it's the first Indiana Jones movie to impart meaningful change on the character. Every film has had Indiana as a little bit of a womanizer, but in Crystal Skull, suddenly the single bachelor adventure man gets married and settles down. It moves the character forward. And you know, I actually really like the ending. It's nice. There's this lovely little moment where the hat falls at Mutt's feet. You think he's gonna take over the mantle, and then in true Indiana Jones fashion, he cements there's only one. Love or hate the rest of Crystal Skull, it's a good ending. Not only to the movie, but for 15 years, it's been a lovely ending to the franchise. That was until The Dial of Destiny. See, Dial of Destiny is a true sequel in the sense that it has to directly deal with what happened at the end of the last movie, which is not something this franchise has had to do before, and it deals with it by tearing all of it up. Dial of Destiny begins and Marion has divorced him and Mutt is dead. He's alone in his flat yelling at his neighbor's loud music. It's quite a depressing state to see this character in. The reason the ending of Crystal Skull is so interesting is because settling down and getting married is the opposite of the single adventuring bachelor that the character has always been. But that doesn't mean he can't have another adventure. It's really interesting putting this movie alongside two of the other big Lucasfilm movies, The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, who also both feature main characters who had a happy ending, only to end up fairly unhappy during the sequels. And I think on a meta level, it's a little damaging. Generally, culture already idolizes youth, but by making these old pop culture icons grumpy, ashamed, and miserable in later life, it paints a pretty bleak portrait of what the future for the rest of us will look like. That said, no matter how you feel about it in the Star Wars films, I can understand why they did it in those movies. Both franchises have multiple films, but unlike the Indiana Jones movies, the original Star Wars trilogy is telling one continuous story, and those characters have one long arc. Luke changes from plucky farm boy to Jedi Knight, Han from selfish scoundrel to selfless hero. But for a sequel, they need a new personal journey. Now, you mightn't like the direction the Star Wars movies took, but you can at least admit those struggles drive a large part of their characters and the decisions they make in the movie. It takes the whole thing in a new direction. And that new direction is really important. Even though I don't like just how dire things are for Indy at the start of Dial of Destiny, seeing heroes broken and having to fight to pull themselves out of something can be really compelling, and is a good place to start for a sequel. Aliens is one of the best examples of this. At the start of the movie, after barely surviving the Nostromo, Ripley has been traumatized. She has nightmares about it, no one believes her about the xenomorphs, and worst of all, she finds out she's been frozen for so many years, her daughter has fully grown up and then passed away. What's brilliant about it is it doesn't undermine the ending of Alien, it uses the consequences of it to go deeper. And even when it takes something away from Ripley, like the death of her daughter, it uses that to give her something new with the relationship with Newt. Newt lost her mother and Ripley lost her child. They're both filling those roles for each other, and it makes that relationship so much deeper. Ripley wasn't able to go back to save her own daughter, but she can save her adopted one. It's not directly stated, but that loss is a key motivator for her. Yes, Alien takes something from Ripley, but it uses it to give her and the story something new. For Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, taking away the happy ending of Crystal Skull does very little to actually drive any of the story forward for this movie. It just undoes the happy ending. For the most part, this movie is just another adventure for Indiana Jones, except it closes it with one of the most baffling endings I've ever seen. So after going on a big long adventure, the Dial of Destiny leads our characters back to 214 BC, and Indy is overjoyed at this. He spent his life studying history, and now here he is right in the middle of it. It's a big deal for him, and he decides maybe he wants to stay. This is the biggest decision the character has to make in the whole movie, whether to return to the present or spend his remaining years in 214 BC. And there's a great argument between him and Helena. She wants them to go back, but he wants to stay. Except the film doesn't let Indy make a decision. Helena knocks him out and he wakes up back in 1969 in his apartment. Marion then appears and they, for some reason, get back together. Credits roll. It doesn't work. The film expects us to buy into it because of the shared history of the characters on screen, but it's very hard to when 2 minutes prior Indy was very happy to just stay living in the past. Why tear up their marriage just to undo it at the end without any of the legwork required to make it work? The movie has just given Indy a lesser version of what he had in the previous movie, and there's nothing in the story that drives the reconnection at all. Marion isn't in the movie until the very end, it's literally just a cameo. What's weird about it is the film feels like it's setting up a more fitting ending, and then it cops out of it. While I don't like just how dour Indy is at the start of this film, having him feeling somewhat out of place in 1969 is a really interesting place to start for his character, and sending him back to 214 BC is a great way to play into that character struggle. I think ending it with him deciding to stay in the past and live out his dream of witnessing history firsthand would have been a really fitting ending. I still don't like the Marion divorce angle, but at least this way it would have meant the film not only took something away, but gave him something new in the end. Everything in the movie up to that point indicates that's what's gonna happen, until Helena knocks him out. Even if you like the official ending for Dial of Destiny, its way of getting there has retroactively made the ending of Crystal Skull a tragedy. What was a happy ending, now on rewatch seems doomed. This movie has been a big flop at the box office, so it seems unlikely they'll wheel out an 81-year-old Harrison Ford for another one, which is probably for the best. But it's a damn shame after having two near perfect closers, it fumbles it completely with this one.